Hey everyone, I'm here with Terry Walling. Terry is the founder and president of Breakthru and the author of Unlikely Nomads. Hi Terry, how you doing?
Hey, great. I'm doing good. Nice to be with you today.
Yeah, we have had a great pre-conversation.
Yeah, I
leading
hope
up.
we didn't actually say all the important things
Uh,
in the
I know,
pre-conversation.
I know. They'll come out again. They'll come out
Okay,
again.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But I've enjoyed getting to know you in these last 20 minutes or so. Tell us just a little bit about what you do.
Yeah. Well, kind of in a transition right now myself, but for most of my life, my topic area has been leadership development. How does God shape leaders over a lifetime for
Mhm.
influence? I believe leadership is influence, not position. We exercise position and choose a position to exercise the influence. So, for the last really 30 years, I've been studying, along with my mentor, Bobby Clinton, how does God
Mm,
shape individuals over time to make their unique contribution. And
mm.
in that, I've been doing a lot of training, doing a lot of writing on resources and books that are on our website, but also specifically doing a lot of coaching and mentoring
Yeah.
of leaders, especially those who are in between. I call them sometimes risk-taking kingdom leaders.
Mm.
They're trying to better discover how God's been at work. So my role is the kind of, in the Top Gun analogy, I'm kind of Goose and they're Maverick, and I ride with them. The only thing I don't like about that story is what
Uh,
happens to
oh,
Goose.
yeah, right.
But in case we have people who are not Top Gun, I'll leave
Mm.
them to explore that.
There you go.
But bottom line is, I really see myself as an individual who's kind of called alongside
Uh-huh.
to do everything I can to help
Yeah,
leaders move into
yeah,
their unique and ultimate kingdom contribution, especially in the day that we're living right now. I believe
yeah,
we're in kind of an in between. And this is really an important time for those who God's got his hand on to
yeah,
not get discouraged, but actually have somebody walking next to them. So
yeah.
that's how I would see myself.
Mhm.
I actually, real quickly, pastored a
Uh-huh.
church for 14 years, was associate, went over to Australia and did ministry alongside pastors and leaders over there.
Yep.
Bottom line, though, is never saw myself being a pastor. The bottom line
Mm.
was let's play baseball. So my problem was I went to college down in San Diego and they hit too many of my curveballs into the ocean. And so I thought I better figure out something else.
Wow.
And that led me, in like C.S. Lewis, almost
Yeah.
kicking and screaming into the pastorate. So
Wow. Wow.
I pastored and then basically moved into
Yeah.
alongside helping pastors. So
That's great. That's great. Well, I wanna hear more of your story, in
sure.
just a moment, but I wanna ask you, a couple of quick get to know you questions, and, the first one is, Terry, if your life was a book, what would its title be?
Ooh, ooh, ooh. So I'm going to, since God's sport is baseball, I'm going to basically say that I'm going to borrow a film title for the love of the game.
Oh,
I think
okay.
that would be the title because, I really do believe, we're in this important time, and I'm got this honor to walk alongside
Yeah,
individuals who are trying to
yeah.
make a difference. So, for the love of the game would probably be my title, huh?
Awesome. I
Uh,
love it. I love it.
yep, yep,
And,
yep.
what would the title of the current chapter of your life be, would you say?
What I'm trying to not call it is swing and a miss,
Ah,
and also, kind of like bottom of the ninth, because I tend to have now gathered a few years, even though I don't feel like it. But I think the other one would be my chapter would be the defining moment.
okay.
So there in a baseball game, there comes in that moment when all of a
Mm,
sudden
mhm.
if you're a baseball fan, you begin to realize,
Yeah,
okay, this is a key moment in this
yeah,
game. Whatever
yeah,
happens next is going to affect the rest of it. So
yeah,
I would call it the defining moment. If you need to, call it the bottom of the
yeah,
ninth, whatever.
yeah.
But it just
That's
signals
great.
an important time for, I think, us as believers,
Mhm.
especially the American church, and for me as a
Yeah.
leader.
That's
So
great.
there you go.
That's
Huh?
great. Well, that's a great then transition into. I want to hear about your story. So the book "Unlikely Nomads" kind of gives language to what is happening in a lot of ways in the
Yeah.
church and among followers of Jesus who
Yeah.
are perhaps moving away from expressions of the church as they've been for a long time. And so,
Right.
anyway, so I'll let you kind of share all of that, but tell us your story and what brought you kind of to where
Mm,
you are
mm,
today. Yeah.
mm. Well, without this turning into a therapy session, bottom line is my story is I grew up in the church, in the American church. I kind of tell people I'm the first holy roller. My dad actually, we went to a real small church, and you have to clean the church once a quarter. So this literally happened. I've been to counseling. I'm okay, but he would put towels around me and roll me down underneath the pew. That was his way of cleaning the pews. And get ready. So that makes me one of the first holy rollers. I've told
Oh,
you,
whoa, whoa, whoa.
I went to
It wasn't-
counseling over it. Leave it alone. Leave it alone.
wow. Wow.
And it only got worse when I ended up going back then and pastoring the church I grew up in, that my
Okay.
parents were still attending, that my mom
Wow.
was my secretary. The only
Wow.
good thing about your mom being your secretary is walking by her desk, which is such a mess, and telling her to clean it up, thinking of all those times she told you to clean up your
Yeah.
room. Very, very therapeutic. And yes, I've used these lines before, but
Yeah.
bottom line is, having grown up in the church, God surprised me by put me back in the church. My really undergrad is in leadership and business administration, all those things. And in the end, I began to realize that this thing that had an important role in my life
Mhm.
needed to actually go to a new place
Mhm.
in its ability to impact culture
Yeah.
and its ability to speak into people's lives and to have a voice. So after pastoring for 14 years, I joined an organization alongside people who were either planting and revitalizing the church and
Mm.
doing everything we can through leadership development to
Mhm.
coach their development. When I was in Australia, I found and learned one truth: personal renewal precedes and leads to any corporate change.
Mm.
So if a change is going to happen within an organization, it must first really happen within the leader and really the key leaders. Their renewal is key to the renewal of the church. We
Yeah.
always work on the structure, and when we do that, we get a fight.
Yeah.
We first, I think, need to
Mm.
reconnect with the Savior and ourselves experience Him in new, fresh ways. And so that's kind of been the impetus of my ministry. How do we help speak into and help individuals discover how God's at work,
Yeah.
experience a fresh renewal and touch? And
Yeah.
so I spent 20 years with this organization trying to help that happen. And then I took a lot of the resources that came from Bobby Clinton, plus my 30
Mhm.
years of experience, 20 years of experience, and founded the organization Leader Breakthru.
Okay.
And we're about coaching and actually now resourcing breakthrough
Yeah.
in the lives of those kind of leaders. So my story is
Mhm.
a deep lover of the church, and yet one who, like many people I'm sure who are listening out there for
Mhm.
years, have struggled with the church and
Yeah.
struggled with her current forms. I'm a
Yeah.
Jesus movement kid. I was there when it was cool to go to a tent and
Yeah.
Maranatha music and all that stuff, which I put in the book. But it all led me to the fact that I really believe we're in a defining
Mm.
moment of time, much
Mhm.
more than just throwing that out there as a trite sentence. I
Yeah.
believe that the expression of the local church has hit a defining moment, and
Mm.
that defining moment is actually now calling us to do the John 10: be sheep, hear his voice, and really allow Jesus to take us to the next pasture. So,
Yeah.
how's that for
That's
scrunch
great.
and boom?
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah, there you go.
That's great. So, okay, so you say something's happening to the church.
Yep,
Maybe unpack that a little bit more.
yep,
What is happening? What has happened? Where have we come from
yep.
that has brought us to where we are now? And then what? well, and we get to what's an unlikely nomad? What does that mean? But let's
Yeah,
talk about the church
yeah.
first. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think, all of us have been reading all the books and everything
Hmm.
like that. But I think the thing that started to catalyze my thinking was Jean Tickle, who wrote The Great Emergence.
Mm.
And she laid out 500-year segments of the church that have occurred. And all of a sudden, I just went, oh my gosh, we've been talking kind of 10,000 feet. We need to see this thing at 30,000 feet. And by that, I mean, see the history of the church really starts assembling itself, not as a formula, but in about 500 years. You got the Great
Hmm.
Schism in 1100s. You got, the Reformation in the 1500s. And then you got us who are living in the 2000s. And I honestly believe that, it was the only time in my life when we experienced that moment when the church shut down and the pandemic
Hmm.
and COVID and everything like that. That was more than just kind of a thing that was sociological. I
Yeah.
actually believe, like he's done throughout history, God uses people, events, and circumstances to
Hmm.
shape us.
Hmm.
And that circumstance right there, along with the people involved, along with the kind of unmasking of the political, evangelical um, alignment with partisan politics and everything like that,
Hmm.
actually signaled that we're in a transition.
Hmm.
And it coincides with what Tickle was saying by way of her research
Right.
that about every 500 years, a major new thrust begins to happen in the church.
Yeah.
And with that, we begin to realize what got us here won't take us there.
Yeah.
The paradigms, the
Yeah.
methods, the things that we're so clinging to are now
Hmm.
potentially actually holding us back.
Hmm.
And I'm sure you did, I did, but during that period of time when we were in COVID and shutdown and everybody was
Yeah.
all of a sudden discovering Zoom and everything like that,
Yeah.
I was in tons of pastors' meetings that said, this is a defining moment. I don't know why I changed my voice, and we're not going back. And you know what? Soon it was over, the majority of the church went running back.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And so what I have given my whole life to, Marcus, I
Yeah.
gave my whole life to restoring and revitalizing the local church.
Yep.
All of a sudden, I came to the point in time to say, not that she's done,
Mm.
but that the current expression of the church,
Yeah.
there's a good possibility, even though it continues on, won't take us into the future of the church.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
And others have been saying things like that. That's not anything fresh and new, but I'll tell you what was fresh and new.
Hmm.
It was saying it to me
Mm. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I had resisted like crazy
Yeah. Yeah.
all of these talks on how the church had to change and the church
Yeah.
needs to be this and everything like that. And I'd given my whole life to revitalizing her,
Mm-hmm.
only to find out clearly in that moment of isolation for me when we're all
Yeah.
kind of alone. Clearly, I
Yeah.
began
Yeah.
to discover, oh my gosh, I think Jesus wants to do a new work.
So what changed in you, or what happened to you that
Yeah.
you embraced that new way?
Well, I hope this is going to sound not like I'm condemning anybody,
Hmm.
but I began to realize that I need to love Jesus more than I love the church.
Yeah.
To some people, that will sound like, wait a minute, they're one in the same.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to first reinstall my love for being an apprentice of Jesus.
Hmm.
Kind of go all the way back and say, well, what is a disciple?
Yeah.
What is it that Jesus was after? And, we've
Hmm.
got this whole push in the American church that's out there toward discipleship. Here's my fear.
Yeah.
We're looking in some sense for the next best 8-week class
Yeah.
that'll help shape people.
Yep. Yep.
And all of a sudden, all the lifelong development stuff that I'd been studying for 30 years came crashing in to
Mm.
say that, you know what? Discipleship never stops.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is our formation and even our return back to him
Yep.
is absolutely critical for us moving on for him.
Yeah.
And, in the book, I do say that, when Jesus is talking to us as a church in Revelation, there is this one that says you're rich and all these other things, but you are poor right now
Yeah.
in that ability to truly understand who I am and follow me.
Yeah.
And so I got to tell you, it was the hardest 18 months, 2 years of my life. But you know what else it coincided? And I hate when this happens, when we have to live out what we teach. A
Yeah.
lot of what I teach is transitions are the most important moment in an individual's life and even in the organization's life, because God does some of his greatest work in the in-between.
Yes.
And
Yes.
God had moved in and began to reshape me and actually took me through a transition
Yeah.
where all of a sudden I had to lay down the things that I treasured,
Yeah.
but potentially were holding me back from being the leader and really the follower and apprentice of Jesus that I needed to be. So,
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
And so would you say you became an unlikely nomad?
I became an unlikely nomad, and
And tell
that's
us what
kind of
that
where
means.
it
Yeah.
came from. Exactly.
Yeah.
And nomads are not wanderers. That's
Okay.
gypsies.
Yeah. Okay. Hmm.
Nomads have an intentional desire. In
Mm.
the way back history wise, they were taking cattle, sheep, whatever, to a new place, or people
Uh-huh.
to a new place. In other words, there was a calling and a destination, and they sat out on the fringe, but they weren't just visiting till the next best, greatest idea. A
Yeah.
nomad is somebody who's intentionally on a road leading somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's in isolation. That's what I felt like. No, most nomads feel very alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is a nomad? They know they can't go back to what it was, but they're not clear which way forward.
Yeah.
And so now what they've done is they've resurrendered their life to who Jesus is, and chosen to follow him and go with others who want a more authentic expression of a life in Jesus and a more authentic expression about apprenticing that life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the key characteristics of an unlikely nomad is they now are not getting their major form of accountability from a Sunday church attendance. They're getting their major form of accountability from a surrender and alignment and apprenticing the life of Jesus.
Yeah.
Do I still believe in the local church more than I ever have? But I believe that our current expression, in fact, this is going to probably cause some people to turn it off, but especially even Sunday morning, is keeping us away from being true apprentices of Jesus. He's calling us back out into the neighborhoods, a church with no walls, and a chance to actually behave our way into now becoming more vibrant apprentices. And honestly, I know this is not answering the question, but I'm a good preacher, so I'm about ready to take an offering. The bottom line is, what we don't recognize is, in the American setting, it's different other places, but in the American setting, they're now heard the message by and large, and they've gone on. Only thing, though, that changes them is when they see the message, when they see it lived out.
Yeah, right.
When they see it actually happen in the context of community.
Yeah.
When they are seeing right in their neighborhood something different.
Yeah.
And when the people who say they're Christians aren't treating them as an object.
Yeah.
Or somebody to get to come to a building.
Yeah.
They're loving them for who they are.
Yeah.
The restoring of the love of thy neighbor. So that's where I think I felt God was saying, Terry, you got to bust down the walls. You got to get out and you got to now in your neighborhood, and I'm kind of an interesting neighborhood. In your neighborhood, live me versus still just keep talking about me.
Yeah.
So.
Oh boy.
I was going to say, how did I do? And
Yeah.
I
No,
just turned on the fire hose. So there you
well,
go. Yeah.
right. So our listeners are generally in traditional
Yep.
church
Yep. Yep.
expressions, including
Yep.
me. Right. I'm a
Yeah.
pastor of a Presbyterian church here in San Diego,
Yep.
and we hear that. I'm going to speak for myself, but probably for some others who are listening as
Yep.
well. We hear that, and it's like, yeah, that's right. That's what I want. That's how I want to do church. That's how I want to
Yep.
follow Jesus.
Yep. Yep.
And we've got these structures in place, and it's hard to take structures down. It's hard to rebuild. Well, whatever. I
Yeah.
don't want to say structures, but
Right.
so I don't even really know exactly what the next question is. But what do we do? Like, how do we
Yeah.
get from here to there? As
Yeah.
let's just maybe you can speak encouragingly to us who are leading regular churches.
Oh,
How do we
yeah.
get from here to there? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to just say very upfront, since I was a pastor, since I know your world, since I've worked alongside pastors and everything, there's a stirring going on in many pastors
Mm-hmm.
who are still in local church expressions
Mm-hmm.
and have a desire to take it there, but feel even caught because of these structures, because of these different even power groups in the church
Mm-hmm.
that are holding on to the capacity to change itself. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that happened when I started writing the book was, okay, I went through this, and it was interesting as I was kind of starting to, so what do we do, God? Kind of a deal. And I actually didn't start out to write this book like this. I started out, just share my memories and everything since I've just turned that magic 70. And bottom line is, I thought, okay, God, if I'm going to talk about it, they're going to want to know what's the next model.
Yeah, right.
What's the next way to do it?
Yeah.
Who's doing it? What's the newest and the latest and the greatest? Somebody give me the template. And nothing. I didn't get anything. Wow. What I began to get, though, was the summation of over my 30 years of working with those who are passionate to see Jesus do something maybe he's never done before. And I started collating those into what I call some postures. Because I don't think we're going to know for a good while what the church is going to look like in America. Here's one thing I'm pretty resolved in. It's not going to look like what we got right now. Will the form stick around? Sure, it'll stick around. But it's going to now begin this process, I think, of changing. And I think the first thing is not to worry about a model or what we're supposed to look at. Worry about first us. So I developed 9 postures that I think will start actually, in some sense, shifting the DNA and shifting us to begin to be more about hearing his voice and more about seeing how he's at work, and then have the courage to align them. But it's a process. It's a journey. And to me, the first place we go is to actually first look at where are we and really give a solid evaluation of where are we in terms of apprenticing the life of Jesus ourselves. And what are the first adjustments we make there? Who else is hearing this voice? That's the next line out. What else does God want to say to us by way of behavior? That's the next. You got to behave your way into the future, I think. And then we can start thinking about what are the implications for the structure. I've just noticed this over and over again, Marcus. We worry about the structure. And honestly, it's our way of casting off our personal responsibility.
Say more about that.
Structure, change the structure, everything will be okay. Here's my experience after 30 years. Change the structure first, and you're going to get a fight.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, you're probably going to lose.
Yeah.
First, change the actual things that are underneath the personal renewal, and then
Yeah.
start moving into actually thinking about collectively. Now,
Yeah.
what do we need to look at based upon the new things we are beginning to experience?
Yeah.
And I do say to the existing pastors that you still have a vital role, even if you're in a local institution like
Mm-hmm.
yourself,
Mm-hmm.
in that you potentially could be what I call a bridging church.
Yeah.
The change happening inside of you, the change happening inside of maybe even a few, can start being a bridge for those people who are
Yeah.
willing to follow Jesus into the new.
Yeah.
And adults need to see a way before they can find their way.
Yeah.
So you start, and then it'll
Yeah.
bring to the surface the others who want to
Mm.
start.
Yeah.
And let's begin a journey. And I think the postures in the book,
Mm-hmm.
they're not the be all to end all. They're not sliced
Sure.
bread or anything like that. But they give us, I think, the key ingredients of what discipleship, see, there it
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
discipleship needs to look like as we move beyond where we are right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, that's a lot of talking.
Man, no, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
And really, really helpful. I think about so we shared before we started recording, we have a mutual
Yep.
friend, Rob Yackley, who leads
Yep.
Thresholds here in San
Great guy.
Diego.
Yep.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm going to drop a couple other names. Do you happen to know Derek Rice, Christiana
I
Rice?
do.
Yeah.
Very well. Yeah.
Derek is the worship leader at my church.
Boom.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And I've known Christiana for quite a few years now
Know
too.
her too.
And then,
She gets into a lot of trouble. Yep.
yeah,
That's
and
great.
John Huckins. Do you know
Oh
John?
yeah, Johnny. Yeah.
Good.
Thin Places, the book Johnny and Rob
Yeah.
wrote and everything.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, right. And I did the Camino with him and Derek a few years ago, about a year
Why
and a half
not?
ago.
Why
Yeah,
not?
right.
Huh?
So
Yeah, absolutely.
anyway, but I love, like, there's a part of me that's like, man, I wish I was a part of something like that, um, and not that I couldn't be, but right now I'm called to serve Mount Soledad Presbyterian Church, and so I love being connected, even if just kind of from the outside to
Sure.
what's happening
Sure.
at Thresholds, kind of vicariously maybe through some friends,
Yep.
but I feel like I want to learn from what they're doing,
Yeah.
and bring that into what we're doing, or how.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
And and like you said, it's a process. It takes time. We're not going to tear down what exists right now, but as we become more, I don't want to say, well, more faithful followers, or just sort of
We're more
really engage.
pliable.
We're
We're more
pliable. Yeah, that's good.
teachable. We're
Yeah.
practicing what I think we need to do is unlearning.
Mm.
Instead of putting all our things on learning, we're unlearning some of the things, not because they were bad,
Yeah.
but because the paradigms have shifted.
Yeah.
And that's why I moved from the postures in the book to guides.
Mm-hmm.
See, I'm still not naming the book doesn't name what the model is going to look like in the years ahead.
Yeah.
It's saying, here's some of the DNA, and here are the people who are out doing it.
Yeah.
Hang out with them.
Yeah. That's
Learn from them. I mean, one of
Yeah.
the things that's gotten one of the biggest response in the book is curators of the table.
great.
Hang out with those people who now realize that we're shifting from a pulpit to a table, who have the art of conversation, who can create a home and an environment and a meal and a ability where people feel safe from all different backgrounds and experiences, and deconstructing and construct, hang out and create this place where we can all talk. That's one of the guides. But I find most, times in the local church, because I came from it, we say, oh, you mean have a fellowship? Oh, you mean have a small group? Oh, we're immediately thinking about a programmatic structure, and we're not thinking about what it is that needs an environment that needs to be created.
Yeah.
And when you hang out with those people, they just do it.
Yeah.
So when you hang out with the thresholds crowd, like I have,
Yeah.
you just enjoy this dinner together.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you go, man, I haven't had something like that forever.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
fact, I'm kind of hungry for that. And then
Mm.
it just starts to rub.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a good rub. It's almost
Yeah.
like a seasoning of the meat where all of a
Mm.
sudden now the flavor of our Christian faith can start coming out again.
Oh, that's so good. I love that. Can you say maybe, and maybe you've already said it, just a little bit more about a bridging church? What
Yep.
does that look like? Maybe you've already said it, but is there anything else to say
No,
about what
no,
a
no, no.
yeah?
I mean, I'm at the first stages of learning them, but I can see
Uh-huh.
them out there.
Hmm.
There are local churches who now are basically taking the emphasis off of Sunday morning
Mm-hmm.
and putting the emphasis on helping people discover how to reintegrate back into their neighborhoods,
Yeah.
helping them do one church front yard mission,
Yeah.
helping them to understand that the probably one of the most important things isn't necessarily investing all our resources into making sure that 1 hour is great.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, we're going to flip it and now start investing our resources in helping the people who say they go here be 24/7 in the lives of those they live next to,
Hmm.
in the
Yeah.
places where they work,
Yeah.
in the students that they hang out with.
Yeah.
And some churches have already gotten it. They're way
Yeah.
ahead. And what a bridging church is, it starts constructing, okay, we told you you needed to be an attender. We're going to start helping you identify and build a bridge
Yeah.
back into the places and the context where God's placed you.
Mm.
And we're going to do everything we can to put resources at your hand.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, you got to hear from these threshold guys. They're fantastic. And not feel like everybody's got to do it, but a bridging church goes after the people who are called to do it and
Mm.
does everything they can
Yeah.
to resource them back out
Mm.
into the community,
Mm.
not as the next church program,
Yeah.
but more that church now happens where his people are,
Yeah.
not necessarily in the
Yeah.
address in which they gather.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I love this. Well, I love the way that you have sort of, again, given language to
Mm,
what's happening and what God is doing, and there's an invitation there, right, to
yeah,
lean into that,
yeah, yeah,
and to try some things. I think there's
exactly.
experimentation involved in this. I think I often think about leading change in terms of listening, right?
Right.
Listening to your neighbors, listening to each other, and listening to
Yep.
God,
Yep.
and then trying something based on all the
Yep.
listening that you've done.
Yep.
And so anyway, so those are my words, but I kind of hear that a little bit in there as well.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Marcus, let me just say one other quick thing.
yeah.
Unlikely nomads can actually be in the local church. They don't have to leave the
Hmm.
local church.
Hmm.
They can be in the local church,
Mm-hmm.
but their heart is restless.
Hmm.
They want something more.
Yeah.
They hunger for an authentic formation and a deeper journey with God.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of people who've had to leave the church.
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, the number one thing I hear from unlikely nomads is the loneliness,
Hmm.
the isolation.
Yeah.
And people in church, well, we just need to come back to church. The problem
Hmm.
is they don't feel like they fit there anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, a lot of them have actually begun years earlier struggling with their faith. And they've started the process even of deconstructing some of that faith, and the church couldn't handle it.
Right.
And basically ostracized them. And so not just them, but those who are also kind of deconstructing what it is to church
Yeah.
and its forms, those people now are out on a road,
Yeah.
and a lot of them are struggling and
Yeah.
alone. And
Yeah.
here's the big misnomer and why I bring it up. People think they've left the church.
Hmm.
No, They still believe, most of them, in the church. They've just left in search of a more authentic expression of Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's hard for pastors to hear. I am one. I
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah.
But they've left also for a new expression of the forms of the church that can actually remove the church from getting in the way of us even speaking more prophetically as a voice into our world because of the life we're living.
Yeah.
Not because of the dogma we believe. The
Yeah.
life we're
Yeah.
living, giving the church the voice it needs into a pretty hurting culture. So I just wanted to say that because the unlikely nomads, some people have looked at the title and gone, oh, those are all the people that left. Well, they don't love Jesus and the church anymore. That's not true.
Mm-hmm.
And some people who have left the church say, how can that person stay in the church? Well, they could potentially be an unlikely nomad. They doesn't mean they buy into everything. In fact, they've been struggling for years. So I think it's, when I'm trying to give the language, I think it's basically people who are in pursuit of, like John 10 says, my sheep hear my voice and follow. They're in new pursuit of Jesus.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And maybe then as pastors, our role is to listen to them